Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Students of the Word. This is session number 64. And tonight we return to paragraph 11 to try to understand, now that we've worked out some of the syntax of that, to work out what exactly he's pointing to. So in order to set up, we want to understand the transition. We're reading the first sentence, which is complicated, of the 11th paragraph. And it starts with one of John's kind of classic transitional gestures. The en tuto, in this. We know in this that we are of the truth. We will know. Yeah, future tense. Can't overlook that. We will know in this, not by this, in this. Still don't understand that translation. Why getting rid of the in, one of John's favorite prepositions. In fact, notice that he's picking up exactly on what he just said. We should love not by means of the word or by the tongue, but en ergo kai aletheia, and I en tuto, right? I mean, so he's immediately echoing this. We should love in deed and in truth. And in this, we will know, right? See that the obvious kind of like momentum and connection there, right? Which again gets submerged when we translate it by. But again, this is me not being critical of translations. I'm so grateful for English translators. I really, really am. Okay. We will know in this. In this, we will know that we are from the truth. Ek, where did it go? Down here. Ek tes aletheas, of the truth. Just as Cain was of the evil one. So I think that this is how we know is the gist, but what to do when he says in this? The key is the this, right? When he uses that demonstrative pronoun, right? In tuto, this, that's just a pointing pronoun, right? This and that, it just points at stuff. And it can point at stuff kind of vaguely, especially if you do this. And I'm not going to lie, I used to tell my students not to do this. What John is doing and is very fond of doing, when I was teaching freshman composition, for instance, I was like, yeah, don't do that. Don't try to resist the temptation to start a paragraph by using a demonstrative pronoun that just vaguely points up at what you've already said, right? So don't say something like, because of this, off we go. Or, after this, we see what, right? I guess that pointer is really vague. But John is fond of this technique. And so let us follow in John's lead here. Yeah, exactly, Stephen. Little did I know I was telling them to be unlike, to not follow the example of the Apostle John. But I will say, in John's defense, the difference is that most of my students were not writing meditation literature, that they were assuming that their readers were going to read and reread and meditate upon for, months and years and their whole lives, right? I know I certainly could not imagine condemning somebody to do that with one of my English 101 papers, whereas I absolutely think that that's what John was thinking. I think that's why he wrote this epistle this way. He is writing poetically. But not just poetically. It's not just a question of poetry versus prose. He is writing meditation literature. This is the Hebrew Bible way, right? I mean, like this is how they did things. Remember, I've made a comment often where I've said clarity is not the number one goal, and that might seem a strange thing to say, right? I think we often kind of come to the Bible with the assumption well, I mean, we come to almost anything we read with the assumption that like clarity of expression, to convey the core ideas clearly is the number one priority. And indeed, it should be the number one priority with many of the things that we read. But again, I think that the way that our logic goes, even if we don't always really examine it, I think the way that our logic goes is, well, the Bible is teaching us, the eternal things of God, right? Literally everything rests on this. So surely the pressure towards clarity is greater, right? So if the Bible is indeed the inspired word of God, and God would surely want some clarity here, this should be clear, right? And so we again, whether we examine the assumption or not, I think we come to the Bible with this assumption that like it should make sense, and we have a hard time when it doesn't make sense, or when it's really difficult to figure out, right? But I think this is it's perfectly clear, I think, in so much of the Bible that what they're doing is not writing something that is going to just be a clear and plain explanation, something that you can just get as soon as you read it and just keep it with you, that thing that you got the first time you read it, all the way through. Instead, they write something which is going to give something back to you every time you read it, no matter how many times you read it. If you treat the Bible like Psalm 1 describes, right, meditating on it day and night, reading it and mumbling over it. That's the literal meaning of that word, the meditate word, that is used in Psalm 1. Anyway, if you are like sitting there and you're muttering it to yourself, right, and rereading it and contemplating it day after day after day, it will continue to yield new things, right? You will see new and new depths and new connections. And I think it's quite clear that John is deliberately writing in that genre. Just as, the writers of Psalms are deliberately writing in that genre. They're not just writing poetry. They are writing poetry. So that already kind of puts it sort of on that level of, where clarity and simplicity of expression is not the number one goal. But they're doing more even than just run-of-the-mill poetry writing. And it's, the kinds of places where it is maximally clear that this kind of thing is happening is in places like Genesis 1, right? Where you've got like these intense, patterns of like, 7 words and then 14 words. And I mean, like, oh my goodness, like it's so ornate, right? And this is not something that's just supposed to be obvious to you at first glance. Anyway, and so therefore, this is me justifying why John is doing what I always told my students not to do, because the point of a student essay is to please, Lord, only read it once and get its point that one time that you do read it, right? So, whereas with John, he wants you to continue meditating. So what that is, the in tuto, the in this, is really an invitation for us to meditate on the connection between what he was saying in the last paragraph and what he's saying right here at the beginning of this paragraph. What is the link? What is the this? What is he pointing to? And how does that connect with what he's saying in this particular clause here? And in this, we will know that we are from the truth. So let's go back. Let's reread the last paragraph, and then straight into the transition, right? So that we can begin to see the kinds of connections that John is building there. Actually, wait. Hang on. Before we do this, there are 2 things I wanted to do today. That's one, but the other is a little bit more technical, and let me do that first. Remember the other thing I said at the end of last time is I want to talk about the hoties, the conjunctions, because if there's one thing I love more than prepositions, it's conjunctions. So I want to, because we have 3 hoties in this sentence, right? Kai in tuto, and in this, we will know hoti. We will know that we are of the truth, Kai, and so we've got Kai and hoti, right? And by this, we will know hoti, that we are of the truth, Kai, and Before him, we will assure the heart of us. Hang on. What was assure again? Persuade. Right. Yeah. Right. Hang on. Wait, that was the other thing. Yeah. Persuaded. Trust. Yeah. Yeah. Obey. Follow. Be convinced by. Okay. We will all right. So all right. Kai, in this and in this, we will know Hoti that we are of the truth. Kai, before him, in front of him, like standing in front of him, we will convince our minds, Hoti, that if our mind should condemn us, should know against us, kataganoske, should know against us, Hoti, that greater than is the heart of God, is greater than is God than the heart of us, right? Than our minds. Kai, he knows all things. Kai hoti, Kai hoti, Kai. All right. So I'm wanting to make sure we're understanding the whole structure of this sentence. In this, we will know the first hoti introduces the object of the first gnosko, right? What's gnosometha, it's future tense, right? By this, we will know, what are we going to know? That we are from the truth. Okay. And before him, we will convince our minds. So this kai, this second and, it's putting the two verbs in parallel, which makes sense because they're the same tense, right? The two future tense words. In this, A, we will know, and B, we will convince the hearts of us. And each one of those verbs has an object, right? In this, A, we will A, know, and B, we will convince. We will A, know what? We will know that we are of the truth. We will convince what? The heart of us. What are we convincing the heart of us of? That if it should condemn us, that God is greater than the heart of us. And he knows all things. So the final and is it's so that last clause, that last hoti clause has a compound verb there. God is greater and knows all. He's greater than our mind and knows all things. Okay, so that it gets complicated by the if clause. So we will know and we will convince our heart. Well, we convince our heart. We will convince our heart that if it condemns us, God is greater than it and knows all things. So God is greater than the heart and God knows all things is what we will convince our hearts of. And if our heart should condemn us is the condition, right? That's the subjunctive bit. That's the condition under which this convincing will happen, right? So notice the overall, we start with the sure thing. We will know, future tense, right? There's certainty in knowledge. Gnosometha. We will know that we are of the truth. And the second part, the convince, right? Convince, we will bring our heart to trust that if our heart should condemn us, right? So the conditional is, so we will know that we are of the truth. But if our heart condemns us, if our mind tells us, if our mind knows against us, and again, I I think it's important not to lose the parallel that the English submerges here. We know that we are of the truth, gnosko, but our heart might know against us, right? This is the two things. On the one hand, by what he just described, by whatever entuta was, which we're going to come back to in a minute, by whatever entuta was, whatever, in that stuff, whatever that is, we know that we are of the truth. But there's another side. He knows that it's very possible that our own minds are going to know against us. There's going to be conflicting knowledge. The knowledge that we are of the truth, are from the truth, and the knowledge against us, the eyewitness testimony of our own wrongdoing, of our own unworthiness. But should our minds speak up in that way, speak against our knowledge that we are from the truth, then we have a means to shut it up, right? We have a means to convince our minds and bring it back into line with the other truth that we know, that we are from the truth, right? How do we bring our hearts back into line? How do we override the testimony of our hearts against us, of our minds, right? Cardia, again, clearly the seat of thought and not just of emotion here, the way that the word cardia is used throughout the New Testament, right? As we looked at that last time, right? So when our minds are speaking against us, how exactly do we override them? How do we overrule the objections of our own minds against this belonging, against this being from the truth? Remember, it's a deep claim. Ektes aletheas. It's not even being of the truth. I mean, of the truth is a pretty good, but from it. Remember, it's the parentage thing. We're like, truth is in our DNA, to use our modern language, right? That's closer to what he's saying here. It's not his, that's our vocabulary, not his vocabulary, right? But I think translating it into our vocabulary, that's how I would translate it. We know that truth is like our DNA. We are from truth. Truth is our parent. That's our lineage. We are from God. We're out of God. We're out of truth. Just as some are out of the accuser or out of the evil one, like Cain, right? It's a fundamental claim. It's a massive claim about us, about ourselves, that we are out of truth. So how do we overrule objections? How do we overrule the knowledge against that, which our hearts, which our minds are certainly going to retain? We will convince the hearts of us that if they should speak against us, that greater than the heart is God. God is greater than our minds. And gnoske panta, and he knows all things. He knows all things. Notice how by itself, I remember, Stephen, I think it was you last week, who was saying that doesn't actually seem reassuring, right? Like that may be a good thing, but that's probably not a good thing, right? If God knows all things, then he knows that we're guilty, right? Then he's going to katagonoske us himself, surely, if he knows all things, right? But remember, what is it that God knows? What is it that God knows? Well, remember, we just were looking at this last time. Not that one, this one. See what kind of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we would be called the children of God. the teknetoutheo, the children of God. And such we are. Notice how he goes right to that same verb to know, for this reason the world does not know us. God knows us. Gnoske panta, he knows all things. And one of those things that God knows because he has declared it. He has called us children of God, and such we are. You see what he's kind of playing with there? Um, you could say, well, you know, you can call yourself a child of God, but that doesn't make you one. Well, when God calls you a child of God, it kind of does make you that. That's kind of how God's pronouncements work, right? If we go back aparches, right? We go back to the beginning and reread Genesis 1, we can see that in fact that's more or less exactly how it works, right? God calls something and it is. And that's what he describes here, that we would be called the children of God, and we are. That's what God knows it. He's not just convinced. He doesn't trust that that's true. Again, here I'm playing on the other verb, right? The Paisomen verb. God isn't he convincing on this point, right? Nor is God going to be convinced, no matter how our mind might katagnoske this, right? Our minds can testify against ourselves all day long. It's not going to change what God knows, because God is greater than our minds. God has simply overruled our cardia, our heart. It doesn't matter what our heart may say against this. And that's really pretty remarkable. Let's go back and look at the intuito now in this. For this is the message which you have heard from the beginning, that we are to love one another, not as Cain, who was out of the evil one and slaughtered his brother. And for what reason did he slaughter him? Because his own erga, his own deeds, works, were evil, but his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, brothers, if the world hates you. That world that doesn't know us because it didn't know him. We know that we have moved out of death and into life because we love the brothers. We know this. The one who does not love abides in death instead of moving out into life. Everyone who hates his brother is a person killer. And you know that no person killer has the life of the age abiding in him. The life of the age abiding in him. We know, gnosko, love, by this, that he set out his psyche for us, his life, his person for us. And we ought to set out our persons for the brothers. But whoever has the life of the world and sees his brother have need and closes his guts against him, how does the love of God abide in him? Little techne, little children of God, let's not love by means of words or with the tongue, but in deed, in works, and in truth. Aletheia. Now, think for a second. That second to last, that sort of cutting rhetorical question, right? It's kind of convicting, isn't it? Whoever has worldly goods and sees his brother or sister in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God remain in him? What is your reaction to that question? Well, I can tell you my reaction to that question. My reaction to that question is that my cardia immediately starts kataganoskiing me, right? My heart immediately starts testifying against me. How does the love of God remain in him? And I'm like, it hits you in the splechna, Scott. I bet it does. I bet it does. Yeah, I mean, my cardia immediately is like, oh man, that's so true. There are so many times. How many times today have I neglected my brother or sister in need? How many times today have I closed my guts against others? So I guess the love of God doesn't abide in me after all, right? I mean, that's a really tempting application of that verse. I was talking about how unusual in this epistle so far that kind of rhetorical question has been. This is not has not so far anyway been one of John's normal techniques. Maybe it's a new technique that he'll continue to use, but he's not really used it so much to this point in the epistle. Um, and so it, you know, it has a pretty strong effect in that way. But the immediate thing that he does afterward, we know by this that we are of the truth. But in this, we will know that we are of the truth and will convince our hearts before him, in front of him. Remember, the before, it doesn't just mean, I think, in the context of this epistle, I don't think when he says before God that he just means like, you know, in the eyes of your Father in heaven, right? Um, in the within the scope of knowledge of your Father who knows all things. Right? This is not just a reminder that God pays attention and God knows. It is that, but I think it's not just that. I think it's referring back to what he just said a couple paragraphs before. Remember, I just went back to 8, right? Um, Back in paragraph, he's talking about being in his presence, in his uh, what's the word? Perusia, right? In his Perusia, in his presence. Um, and the question is, how are we going to respond when we see him? When we see him as he is, are we going to shrink away from him in shame? Or are we going to have confidence? And that seems to be exactly what he's bringing up again. When he talks about assuring our minds, about our minds, I think it's exactly our minds kataganoskeing us, our minds testifying against us, knowing against us, is exactly what would cause us to shrink away in shame at in his presence. Right? I mean, I think there's he's clearly talking about the same thing there. Um, yes, Scott, that is so good. Um, that is so good. Whoever has worldly goods and sees his brother or sister in need and closes his heart, right, closes his guts against him, how does the love of God remain in him? If that sounds like a guilt trip, Scott is reminding us, well, isn't that isn't that what the accuser does? That's the diabolos's job. And if we are in fact children of God and not children of the accuser, we probably shouldn't do the works of the accuser, right? We should be doing the work of the paraclete, the defender, right? The uh the defending counselor. Um yeah. So I think it is really pretty clear that his rhetorical question there in verse 17 is not a guilt trip. Whoever has worldly goods and sees his brother or sister in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God remain in him? Little children, let's not love by means of words or with the tongue, but in deed and truth. In this, when we love in deed and in truth, when we are in truth, and by being in truth, we are in love, and by being in love, our love is manifested in deeds, right? All of those things, all within each other and superimposed on each other, right? When this happens, when we are abiding in truth and truth is abiding in us, and we are abiding in love, and love is abiding in our deeds, then we will know that we are of the truth. But notice, this is not. Remember what I was talking about when this makes me think back to paragraph 9, right? The big no one who sins has seen him or knows him paragraph, right? And remember I was talking about this sort of in the end, we were theorizing that what he's doing, what he's talking about, the reason that he's saying these things which seem impossible, no one who is born of God practices sin, stuff like that, is because he's talking about that future state when we will be like God. There's the future state. There's the thing that God has declared in the present tense, that we are children of God. And yeah, there is a process, right? We talked about that's the transition out of this paragraph and into paragraph 9, into 8, out of 8 and into 9. Everyone who has this hope fixed on him purifies himself, just as he is pure. There's a process of going from what our minds will be not slow to inform us that we still are, into that thing that God has declared us to be, that we know it's not yet been revealed what we will be. We don't even understand. We don't even know what we're gonna become, right? And yet, God, oh man, I forgot that. Oh, that is so cool. Hang on. Yeah. All the way back to the top here. Beloved, agapetoi, beloved. Now we are children of God, and it has not been revealed ephanerothe, what we will be. We know oidamen, we have that theoretical, that head knowledge, that we will be like him, or we will see him as he is. But it's not been revealed what we are, right? But you know what? God doesn't have to wait for the revelation. It's not been revealed to us, but God already knows. And he doesn't just oidate. Right? He doesn't just, we oidamen, that when he appears, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is. We understand. We understand that's going to happen, right? It's not been revealed yet. It's not yet been made manifest. But we know it. We understand that that's what's going to happen. But what does God do? Well, that goes right straight back to our verse, right? God, genoske panta. God knows all. He genoskes. He has come to know. God is acquainted with the us, right? With that which has not yet been revealed to us, but which we understand, which we oidate. But God already genoskes it. He knows. Present tense. We will know, future tense, that we are from the truth. Uh, and notice even the convincing of our hearts is future tense. Future tense again, because I am 100% convinced that he is thinking about this time, about God's parousia, about God's presence. He's thinking about the time of revelation, when God is revealed, ephanerothe, and we are standing before him. Right? He's referring straight back to this. And when that happens, we're going to be tempted to shrink away from him in shame because our cardia is going to kataganoske us. It's going to happen. But if it does happen, it will probably happen. But if it happens, then God is going to overrule it because God has declared, God knows that we are his children. He has declared it that we are his children. He's called us that, and we are his children. And that is greater than our hearts, greater than our minds. God, genoske panta, he knows all things. The convincing of our hearts of this won't be complete, right? Until we get there. Then we will know. We will convince our hearts, and we will know that we are from the truth. So back to verse 17 and 18. Why then, what is the point of the rhetorical question? The rhetorical question points out that, like, in fact, in the present, we do act as if the love of God is not abiding in us. Because we do that, in fact, right? We do have the life of the world and see our brother have need and close our guts against him. We do that sometimes. And when we're doing that, the love of God is not abiding in us in that moment, right? That thing which is going to be stably true, with that thing which God has declared in advance and which God knows hasn't happened yet. Remember, the whole premise of this epistle from the beginning has been, so you believe in Jesus, now what? Right? How do we now live? So yeah, there's going to be, there are going to be those moments. And that's why he has the imperative, right? Let's not love with word or with tongue, right? Let's not love by words. How about we not do that? How about instead we love in deed and in truth? And in that, in doing that, in living that way, in being that way, and abiding in love and in truth, we will know that we are of the truth. We will get a taste of that thing that shall be perfected. And we shall be, in doing so, in living that out, in practicing that, we shall be, we shall be abiding in him. We shall be purifying ourselves, even as he is pure, right? This is, I think we can really begin to see now more clearly, at least I feel that I'm seeing more clearly, how John means to resist the problem, which has been a problem for countless millions of Christians over the centuries, right? There are two problems you must not fall into as a Christian. One is believing that you're not sinning at all, right? When believing that you're totally fine, like it's important to be aware of your sinfulness, but at the same time, you can't submit to it. Um, and different individuals, different, denominations or bodies or organizations have fallen to a greater or lesser extent in either one of these two directions, right? Either to believe that you have arrived, you are one of the saints, right? You are accepted, you are written in God's book, and nothing can change that, right? Um, versus on the other hand, saying, you know what, like I'm hopelessly sinful, and there's nothing I can do about that, right? My heart is desperately wicked, and so you know that's the way it is. And there will be people who will argue very piously, right, to say it is not possible for me to live without sin. um to which I always want to say, not even, not even briefly, not even gonna, you're not even gonna have a go. Right, like you're just uh uh okay, yeah. Now obviously there are varying degrees in which when one can go, sort of can uh, wander off the path, using one of John's earlier metaphors, in one direction or another here. Um, but uh, but John does not concede to either one of those two things, right? Sin is not okay. Sin is fundamentally contrary. Sin is lawlessness. It is rebellion against God. It is in every way just screamingly contrary, screamingly in conflict with God's being, with the kind of connection with God, right? That we are told that we have, that we do have and must have, right? And yet, um, it is also true that we are not going to succeed in abiding in God at all times, right? Um, remember that this gap, this disjunction between theory and practice has been a dominant theme of this epistle from the very beginning, right? If you say you have fellowship with God and yet walk in darkness, from the beginning of paragraph 2, he's been talking about that. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. There's no room. No way. If you are in God, you cannot bring any darkness with you. It's not possible. You must be pure, even as he is pure. That's what it's about. There's no compromise of that. There's not even like, I'm just going to linger in this impure world until I'm finally taken away to a better place, right? That's not, you're lying and not doing the truth if you settle down in that place of disjunction, right? Of gap between what you say and what you do, between theory and practice, right? But he acknowledges all the way through that theory and practice, that gap between theory and practice exists, right? In paragraph 9, he's not trying to deny it, right? To pretend it's not there. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, yes, exactly, Scott. Just because we can't attain perfection is no reason not to try to. Um, yes, yeah, it's, and what are we supposed to try? What are we supposed to do? What is the whole direction of John's teaching so far? Remember, we keep coming back to this. His practical advice has been quite limited, right? Uh, we if you're taking careful notes and trying to build a list of do's and don'ts from this epistle, you've got a pretty short list so far, right? He doesn't give that kind of guidance. What he says, we're supposed to love, we're supposed to abide in God, God's love will be perfected in us. We're supposed to abide in God, and God is supposed to abide in us. That's what we're supposed to try. So Scott, when you think about trying, right? That's what we're supposed to try. We're supposed to try to abide in God and for God to abide in us. Because you know what'll happen then? What'll happen then is when God is abiding in us, we won't sin. You know why? Because no one who is born of God practices sin, because his seed abides in him and he cannot sin because he is born of God. That's why. Right? When God abides in us, then that future, that time when we will be like him because we will see him just as he is here, right? For that time. We will know that we are of the truth. When we love in deed and in truth, when we set out ourselves, our persons, our psyche, our lives, as Jesus set out his, to be used up and consumed by others. When we do that, we're abiding in him. When we abide in him, we will do that, right? And this is why when it comes to commandments, as he's about to define it finally, right? We're getting there. Just a couple of verses, he's going to actually say, this is his commandment, right? But he's never going to get past this. Believe and love. That's it. That's just straight out of the gospel, right? Love the Lord God, love your neighbor as yourself. Those are all the commandments you need. Those are the only rules that you need. If you abide in truth and have love abiding in your deeds, then that's what will happen. Yes, Susan says those are hard enough. I agree. I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Um, okay. Let's um let's peek ahead. Start verse 21. Okay, in English. Beloved, if our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence before God. And whatever we ask, we receive from him because we keep his commandments and do the things that are pleasing in his sight. Talk about your verses, which would be a little bit dangerous, cross-stitched in a frame all by itself, right? I don't think I've ever seen that one in cross-stitch, but I think I have seen it, on a poster or a bumper sticker or something. Whatever we ask, we receive from him because we keep his commandments and do the things that are pleasing in his sight. Sounds like uh, a good arrangement, doesn't it? Right? Like there's some kind of I don't know what, like a kind of a gentleman's agreement maybe that we have with God. Tell you what, God, uh, if I keep your commandments and do the things that are pleasing to you, then you'll give me anything I ask. It's a sweet deal right there, right? That is, I think God's getting fleeced in that agreement personally, but anyway, you see what I mean, right? This is a way that I think people often think about it. It sounds like that taken out of context. So let's put it back into context. Beloved, if our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence before God. Holy cow, that's exactly what he said. But again, this really cementing. the observation from before that he's right back to paragraph 8 with this stuff. Agapetoi, even that word he used for the first time back there in that same, remember, like back in paragraph 8, um, uh, beloved, now we are children of God. Agapetoi, now we are children of God. And it has not yet appeared what we will be. Agapetoi. If the cardia, if the mind of us, if the mind of us does not katagnoske. Hmm. Hmm. I should probably get to the right paragraph. Might make more sense. Our heart does not condemn us. We have confidence before God, says the NASB. If the heart of us, okay, just should condemn us is just reflecting that it's subjunctive. Should the heart of us not, should our minds not condemn us, not katagnoske us? In the unlikely event, right, that your mind doesn't testify against you, we have paresian. That looks like the same word, right, as the peisomen. Bet you it is. Yeah, it's related, clearly. Freedom of speech, confidence. Let's see. Oh, Jesus speaking openly. That's interesting. Let's see. John uses it a bunch of times. Let's see. Oh, when Jesus is like to be known publicly. Wow. Um, no man spake openly of him. He is speaking publicly, and there's right. Look, he speaks boldly, as it says in the King James. You are, if you are the Christ, tell us plainly. Yes. Interesting. Oh, right. Yeah. Then John 11, when he's like, Lazarus is asleep, and they're like, oh, well, that's good. I mean, I'm glad he's getting some rest. And then he's like, no, I mean, he's dead. Right. Like then so he has to say it plainly. Uh, yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. He has to say it, what, confidently? That's really strange. These definitions don't really seem to fit openly. It's about freedom. Like unrestrained, bold speech. Like bold, not in the sense of like it takes a brave person to say that, but bold in the sense of I'm not mincing words. I'm, I'm, um, yeah, bald even, Susan. Yes, I agree. I agree. That seems to be exactly how it is. Let's keep going in John. We got lots of John references. That's great. Okay. He's walking openly among the Jews, right? He's just out there in public, right, for everybody to see. Yeah. Right. Will tell you, right, in John 16, he will tell you plainly of the Father, and he's going to speak to you. Yeah. Openly, freely. Oh, he's all over this. John uses this constantly in the gospel. I spoke openly to the world. Yeah. Interesting. I was guessing that when the apostles were speaking with all boldness, they would be using this, where they're speaking the world of God with boldness. Yes. Paul is doing the same thing in Rome in the very last verses of Acts. Yes. Okay. And peeking ahead, are we going to use this little spoiler? Oh, darn it. First John, of course, comes so late in the New Testament. They always have to scroll to the bottom. Oh yeah. Oh, we got it. We got a couple more. Have we gotten it before? Oh, look in paragraph 8. This is exactly the thing we were supposed to have and not shrink away in shame. Yeah, boldness. And we're going to get this twice more. Oh, yeah, John's all over this. Okay, okay. Paresian, confidence, boldness, plainness, openness. Yeah, that's really interesting. Going back to the paragraph 8 version, right? Say here it is. Now, little children, abide in him so that when he is revealed, we may have this. We may be open. Yeah, of course. Of course. It's not just confident in the sense of like, I feel good about myself, right? We may have openness, that we may stand in the presence, in the parousia of God and say, yeah, open book, God, here I am. Look at me. It's exactly the opposite move of shrinking away in shame, right? Trying to cover yourself. Oh my goodness. You see where we are? You see where we are? Genesis 3 again. Of course. Not shrink away from him in shame, just like Adam and Eve did, knowing that they were naked. Obviously. Why didn't I think of that before? Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. Anyway, yes. So we may be boldly. We may be naked and not ashamed instead of shrinking away from him in shame and trying to cover ourselves with fig leaves at his coming, right? Yes. Exactly the kind of openness that is both sort of contained in and represented by the nakedness of Adam and Eve. Holy cow, I can't believe I didn't see that before. Wow. That is seriously, I'm I'm beginning to like kind of no, I'm not doing this. I should do this. I feel like it's almost like a rule when you're interpreting any passage in the Bible. You need to first ask like, are they thinking about Genesis 1 through 3 here? And if not, why not? Like, because I mean, it is so on the brain. Holy cow. Anyway, okay. Yes. Wow. That is exactly what he's talking about here. Openness. We meet maybe naked and unashamed. Because that's that nakedness thing. That's exactly it, right? The plainness, the boldness, openly in public. Yes. Holy cow. Okay. Um, if our if our heart should our heart should our minds not kataganoske us, not know against us, we have openness. We will be naked and unashamed before God, in front of God. Just as, and that's the same word, yeah. Ek, yeah. No. Darn it. Come on, NASB, do better. Now, instead of concealing the wordplay, it's creating one that isn't there. The first one is before God, like in front of him. Verse 19. Verse 21 is not before God, it's towards God. It's a different preposition. Proston theon. Oh, proston, we've gotten that. Toward God. Hang on. Hang on. I wish the paragraph 8 didn't straddle 2 and 3. Okay, I wanted to see what the preposition was. Um, we might be naked and unashamed and not be ashamed before him. Here is ap otu because it's shrink away from him. Yeah, because this doesn't mean before. And once again, our interlinear is lying also. Ap means away from. Yes. Look at that. I remembered. Pretty soon I'm going to have my conjunctions and prepositions pretty well straight in Greek. Uh, yeah. Okay. So this is away from him. So there is no actual before him in this sentence, this chapter 8 sentence. Okay. All right. So then in back to chapter three, wanted to compare that. Oh, beloved, if the heart of us should not condemn us, should not kataganoske us, we have, hang on, notice it's not future tense here. We have confidence. We have openness. Pros ton theon. Toward denotes motion toward a place. Yeah. Don't return to Herod. Right then, Jerusalem went out to him. Ooh, the axe is laid to the root of the tree from John the Baptist. Yeah. Comest thou to me? And Jesus said to him, permit it. Oh, it's the thing you're it's the thing that Jesus's foot isn't supposed to do against a stone, according to the devil's temptation. You strike your foot against a stone. So it not only just means to generally go in the direction of, but even like to hit something. So this is a very direct. I bet you this takes the accusative. I bet you the object of this preposition is in the accusative. Let's check that when I get back. If you look on a woman to lust after her, ooh, or do things in order to be seen of men. Yeah. If you're sent to the lost sheep, come to me. All right, there's lots. Since I'm here, uh, indulge me for a second. I was remembering a place where this phrase came up in First John. I can't get them all. Oh, come on. You're only giving me disappointing. Wanted to see the First John usages. Oh well. Okay, it's fine. I get it. Does it use the accusative? Am I correct? Sorry, I just scrolled away from it. To boom. Oh yeah, sure does. So this confidence is something we have at God, like right up against him. That's where I think his presence is being implied here. It's not like we have confidence towards God. Like when you just say we have confidence towards God, that just sounds like it sounds kind of vague, right? Like in English, if somebody said you have confidence towards something, you might be like, you mean like confidence about that, right? But no, this is confidence in God's face. I think this is, I think his use of proston in this case seems to me to imply right, right at him, right to him. In other words, in front of his face. I think this is another talking about his Perusia. Exactly. This is climbing up into God's lap. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, you're not just having confidence at God. You're having confidence right face to face with God. Prostontheon strikes me as a pretty significant. I mean, it's a big claim to have paresian, openness, right in front of God. That really is about seeing God face to face, about seeing him as he is and being like he is. Beloved, if the heart of us should not condemn us, then we have present tense, not future tense. We have openness towards God, to God. Kai, and Whole and that is not whatever. This is just that. Another one of those vague, yeah. Which, what, that, yeah. And what? Okay, and if we should ask, we receive in the present tense from him up, autu. We receive it from him because the entolos, the commandments of him we keep. We keep his commandments. Hoti, because. It's the hoti of cause. Whatever we. And I'm trying to figure out the if here. I'm confused. Beloved. Because we've got a couple aeons. I'm trying to see the whole picture here. Beloved, if the heart of us should not condemn us, we have confidence towards God. And if whatever we might ask, we receive from him, because the commandments of him we keep, and the things pleasing before him we do, then there's nothing else. And this is the commandment. No, that's clearly a new sentence. Okay, so if all of those are if clauses, then there's no main verb. Beloved, if the heart of us should not condemn us, no, we have confidence towards God. That's the main verb. Is there another main verb? Is it like a compound thing? And like, I'm trying to figure out what to do with the chi here. Does the chi introduce a new clause? Or is there another verb? Is there another thing that we do other than having confidence towards God? And if and whatever we ask, we receive. This is accusative. Yeah. And if we ask whatever, we receive whatever. Hall is like a super vague word. If we ask, we receive the whatever from him, because okay, without the if, it makes perfect sense, right? Beloved, if our hearts don't condemn us, we have confidence towards God. And whatever we ask, we receive from him. That's exactly how it's translated. They just ignore the heck out of that if. But there's an if in there. How does King James do it? Beloved, if our heart condemn us not, then we have confidence toward God. And whatsoever we ask, we receive of him, because we keep his commandments. Okay. King James is ignoring the if too. Dear friends, if our hearts do not condemn us, we have confidence before God and receive from him anything we ask. See, it just does. See, notice how the NIV is doing it like it is a compound verb. We have confidence and receive from him anything we ask, because we keep his commandments, do what pleases him. Huh. Okay, I didn't get to the others. I apologize. I was prepping this before class, but I ran out of time. So they're all ignoring that if. But that makes me uncomfortable. Maybe this is some kind of Greek syntax convention I don't know about. Is it to signal that this is a then of that if the heart of us does not condemn us, we have confidence towards God. And no, because the then is having confidence towards God. If the heart, then we have confidence. But the thing that's troubling me here is there's no then down here. If we make this an if clause, and if whatever we ask we receive, then what? Nothing. Just a because statement. Unless, what if Hoti isn't because? What if Aeon and Hoti are related to each other? Huh. I am deeply puzzled. There might be good reason to ignore that second if, but I can't see it. And the reason I can't see it is because it's in a totally different clause. That first one works just fine. Beloved, if this is true, then this other thing happens. If our heart doesn't condemn us, then we have confidence towards God. No problem. And he says, seeming to completely introduce a totally new clause or even new sentence, we could put a period there. In fact, some do, right? The NASB puts a semicolon. King James just slaps a period there. NIV goes in the opposite direction. Let's explore this more. Let's look. Maybe our friends at the NIV are onto something here. And what they're suggesting is that have a common. Remember, it's what I was looking for. Like I was looking to see, is this verb in fact a compound verb, right? If the heart of us isn't, should I condemn us? Then A, we have confidence, and B, whatever we ask, we receive. That's what they're doing. And receive from him anything that we ask. So it's taking echomen and lambanomen, which are both, right, first person plural, present and indicative, active. So those are a matching pair in that way. We have confidence and we receive whatever we ask. From him. About to. Okay, I have an idea. What if aeon here is part of the we might ask? What if this conjunction, what if this aeon is just to launch us into the subjunctive here? Like we might receive anything if we ask for it, that sort of thing. So if the if is just part of this local, this small construction. So the if is not part of the overall clause. If we receive whatever we ask, it's not that. If the whole aeon itomen is a thing itself, if the aeon points us to the theoretical nature of the subjunctive verb that's coming here, if theoretically we ask for something. And we receive whatever we theoretically ask for, essentially. From him. Both asking and receiving, presumably. because the receiving would be because we keep the commandments of him and do the things that are pleasing before him. Enopion? And pros then. 7:15? No, that's not the same. What is this one? In the sight of. Oh, this one is in the sight of. In the presence of. Different word, but same concept. Right. Yeah. Stephen, I'm wondering that's exactly what I'm thinking. Stephen is saying that like in English, in order to indicate the subjunctive, we use the helping verb might. Whatever we might ask, right? And he's wondering if the an is not a helping verb. Of course, it's a conjunction, but if it serves a similar kind of function, if like aeon itomen, that's exactly the theory that I'm coming up with here. If we ask, no, and we receive whatever we if ask, right? Whatever we, whatever we theoretically ask for, whatever we should ask for. We receive whatever we should ask for. So aeon is kind of folded into that. If that's true, then it makes sense. And of course, if that's true, then I can see why they dropped it in the English translations. Because we keep the commandments things and do the stuff, even more vague than whole up there. And do the stuff that's pleasing in his sight. In Opion, that's like that actually to contain the word sight, literally in the eye of. Yeah, I thought so. Like optics, right? In opios, I assume that was an actual eye word, and it is in the eye of, right? Things that are pleasing in the eye of him. Okay, good. I think it's good. So we're sorry. I feel like I've got into this poor rhythm of coming to the end of a session when we've looked through it word by word, like when we've sorted out the words but haven't made sense of the thing at all yet. But it's okay. We'll do it at the beginning of next time. Okay, so next time we're gonna go back because I'm still a little bit fuzzy about um the circumstances under which our heart is or is not condemning us, right? We've got the future probable condemnation of our heart, which God will overrule, that we already discussed. But why is he saying, what are the circumstances under which our heart is not going to be kataganoskaying us? I'm trying to understand that a little bit better. Um, and then what on earth does this have to do with, you know, that really amazingly favorable transaction of getting anything we ask for from him, because we keep his commandments and do pleasing things? Um, how does that work in the context, not taking that out of context, but keeping it in the context of what John is saying in this paragraph and in this epistle as a whole? What does he mean? And why is he saying that here? Why does he transition from being naked and unashamed in front of God to asking and receiving, like getting stuff and keeping commandments? Anyway, so that's where we'll start next time. Try to see if we can get a clearer picture of all that. And then who knows? Maybe we will move on to verse 23, where the actual commandment is finally explained. All right. All right. Very good. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining me again, and I will see you soon next time. Thanks very much. Bye now.